The scorching sun beat down mercilessly on the Nevada desert as Samuel Aldridge rode along the barren trail, his canteen half empty and his hopes running just as low. It was the summer of 1878, and the 30-year-old cowboy had been tracking a herd of wild mustangs for 2 days, determined to bring back something worthwhile to his struggling ranch outside Sierra City. His weathered hat provided little relief from the unforgiving heat that seemed to rise in visible waves from the cracked earth beneath his horse's hooves. Samuel pulled his bandana up over his nose, squinting against the harsh glare. His chestnut mare, Penny, trudged forward dutifully despite her obvious fatigue. They'd been riding since dawn, and Samuel knew they'd need to find shelter soon or risk being caught in the open during the hottest part of the afternoon. "Just a little further, girl," he murmured, patting Penny's neck. "We'll find those mustangs or at least some shade." It was then that he spotted something unusual in the distance. A dark shape collapsed against a large boulder. At first he thought it might be an animal, perhaps a deer or coyote seeking shade. But as he drew closer, his heart hammered against his ribs. It was a person. Samuel spurred Penny forward, covering the distance quickly. As he approached, he could see it was a woman, her dress torn and dusty, her body motionless in the shadow of the rock. He dismounted in a hurry, boots hitting the ground hard as he rushed to her side. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" he called, kneeling beside her. She stirred slightly, her face turned away from him. Her dark hair was tangled with dust and small twigs, and her hands were scraped raw. Samuel gently turned her over, revealing the face of a young woman, perhaps in her mid-20s. Her lips were cracked from dehydration, her skin hot to the touch. "Water," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Samuel immediately reached for his canteen, uncorking it and carefully lifting her head to help her drink. "Easy now," he cautioned as she gulped desperately. "Not too fast or you'll make yourself sick." The woman's eyes fluttered open, striking hazel eyes that fixed on him with a mixture of fear and gratitude. She drank several small sips before he eased the canteen away, knowing he needed to ration what remained. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "What happened to you?" "Willa," she managed, her voice stronger now but still raspy. "Willa Barrett." "I'm Samuel Aldridge," he replied. "What are you doing out here all alone, Miss Barrett?" She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength. "Stagecoach, ambushed, 2 days ago I ran." "Got lost." Her words came in fragments as she struggled to explain. Samuel's jaw tightened. Stagecoach robberies weren't uncommon, but they usually didn't happen this far off the main roads. "Were you the only survivor?" he asked, dreading her answer. A tear slipped down her dirt-streaked cheek. "I don't know, there was shooting. I just ran." She attempted to sit up but winced in pain. "Don't try to move too much," Samuel cautioned, supporting her shoulders. "You're lucky to be alive out here in this heat." He looked around, assessing their situation. The boulder provided minimal shade, and the afternoon sun was climbing higher. They couldn't stay here. "Miss Barrett, my ranch is about half a day's ride from here. Can you travel if I help you?" Willa nodded weakly. "I don't have much choice, do I?" Despite her condition, Samuel caught a glimpse of determination in her eyes that impressed him. He helped her to her feet, supporting most of her weight as she swayed unsteadily. "My horse can carry us both," he said, leading her to where Penny waited patiently. "I'll need to lift you up." "Is that all right?" "Yes," she whispered, her face flushing slightly. Though whether from embarrassment or the heat, he couldn't tell, Samuel lifted her as gently as possible, surprised at how light she felt in his arms. He settled her in the saddle before mounting behind her, one arm securely around her waist to keep her from falling. "Lean back against me if you need to," he told her. "It's going to be a long ride." As they set off, Samuel couldn't help but notice the faint scent of lavender that still clung to her despite days in the desert. He felt an unexpected protectiveness toward this stranger, this survivor who had endured what most men couldn't. Something stirred in him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Not since losing his wife to fever 3 winters ago. Willa drifted in and out of consciousness as they rode, occasionally mumbling words he couldn't quite make out. Samuel kept a steady pace, careful not to jostle her too much. Every so often, he would stop to give her more water, ignoring his own thirst. The landscape gradually changed as they traveled, the barren desert giving way to scattered sagebrush and occasional scrub pine. By late afternoon, they had reached more familiar territory. Samuel's small ranch came into view as they crested a rise, a modest cabin with a barn and corral, nestled in a small valley where a creek provided precious water. "We're almost there, Miss Barrett," he said, noticing she had been quiet for some time. She stirred against him. "Willa," she corrected softly. "Please call me Willa." "Willa," he repeated, the name feeling strangely right on his lips. As they approached the cabin, a tall, lanky figure emerged from the barn. Samuel's ranch hand, Tom Jenkins, a former soldier who had been with him for nearly 2 years. "Sam." Tom called out, hurrying toward them. His eyes widened as he noticed Willa. "What in tarnation found her in the desert?" Samuel explained tersely as he carefully dismounted, keeping one hand on Willa to steady her. "Stagecoach robbery, she needs care." Tom moved quickly to help, supporting Willa as Samuel dismounted completely, then lifted her down from the horse. "Get her inside," Samuel instructed. "I'll tend to Penny and be right there." Tom nodded, helping Willa toward the cabin while Samuel led his exhausted horse to the barn. He worked quickly, removing Penny's saddle and bridle, giving her a quick rub-down and ensuring she had fresh water and feed. His mind, however, was entirely on the woman he'd found. When he entered the cabin a short while later, Tom had already settled Willa in Samuel's bed and was awkwardly trying to offer her a cup of water. "I'll take over," Samuel said, setting down his hat and crossing to the bedside. "How is she?" "Exhausted and dehydrated, I reckon," Tom replied, gladly relinquishing his position. "But no bullet wounds or broken bones that I could tell." Samuel nodded. "Thank you. Would you mind riding into Sierra City and fetching the doctor?" Tom grabbed his hat. "Already thought of it. I'll head out now and should be back by morning if I push hard." After Tom departed, Samuel turned his attention fully to Willa. Her eyes were closed, but her breathing seemed steadier. He dampened a clean cloth and gently began wiping the dust from her face and hands. "Mr. Aldridge." She murmured, her eyes fluttering open. "Samuel," he corrected with a small smile, "you should rest. My ranch hand has gone to fetch the doctor from town." "You've been so kind," she whispered, "giving me your water, your bed." "Anyone would have done the same," he replied, though they both knew that wasn't necessarily true in these parts. "I don't think so." Her hand weakly caught his as he withdrew the cloth. "Thank you, I would have died out there." Their eyes met, and Samuel felt something pass between them, a connection he couldn't explain. He carefully extricated his hand. "You need food and rest. I'll make some broth." While Willa drifted back to sleep, Samuel busied himself at the small iron stove, heating water and preparing a simple broth from dried meat and the few vegetables he had stored. The cabin was quiet except for the occasional crackle from the stove and Willa's soft breathing. As night fell, Samuel sat in a wooden chair beside the bed, watching over his unexpected guest. In the gentle light of the oil lamp, he could better see the fine features of her face beneath the dust and sunburn. She was beautiful, with high cheekbones and long lashes that cast shadows on her cheeks. He wondered what her story was, where she'd been heading, what kind of life she'd left behind. Sometime during the night, Willa began to thrash and moan, caught in the grip of a nightmare. Samuel moved to her side, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Willa," he called softly, "you're safe now, you're safe." Her eyes snapped open, wild with fear, until they focused on his face. "The men with guns," she gasped. "They were shooting everyone." Samuel sat on the edge of the bed, taking her trembling hand in his. "It's over now. You're at my ranch outside Sierra City. No one will hurt you here." She took several deep breaths, calming herself. "I was traveling to San Francisco," she explained, her voice steadier. "My aunt lives there. I was leaving St. Louis to start a new life after my parents died." "I'm sorry about your parents," Samuel said quietly. Willa nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "It was influenza last winter. They both went within days of each other. There was nothing left for me there." Samuel understood loss all too well. "My wife, Elizabeth, died 3 years ago," he found himself saying. "Fever took her before the doctor could do anything. I'm sorry, Willa whispered, squeezing his hand. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, two people who had experienced profound loss, finding unexpected comfort in each other's presence. You should try to eat something, Samuel finally said, retrieving the pot of broth he'd kept warm on the stove. It's not much, but it will help your strength return. He helped her sit up, propping pillows behind her back, and handed her a mug of the warm liquid. She drank slowly, color gradually returning to her cheeks. This is good, she said with a small smile. You're a better cook than you let on. Samuel chuckled. Don't get your hopes up. This is about the extent of my culinary skills. Still, it's the first real food I've had in days, she replied. The stagecoach was attacked before we stopped for our midday meal. Do you remember anything about the men who attacked you? Samuel asked. The sheriff will want to know. Willa's face clouded. There were 4 or 5 of them. They wore bandanas over their faces. One had a scar above his eye. I saw it when his bandana slipped. She shivered despite the warm night. They shot the driver first. Then they started firing into the coach. I was sitting near the door, and when someone pushed it open in panic, I fell out. In the confusion, I just ran. You did what you had to do, Samuel assured her, and it kept you alive, but the others. Her voice broke. We'll send word to the sheriff tomorrow, Samuel promised. If there were other survivors, they'll want to know you're safe. Willa finished her broth and handed the mug back to Samuel, their fingers brushing. A small jolt of awareness passed through him at the contact, catching him by surprise. You should get some more rest, he said, standing abruptly. I'll sleep in the chair. That's not necessary, Willa protested. I've already taken your bed. I insist, Samuel replied firmly. You need proper rest to recover. As he settled back into the wooden chair with an extra blanket, Samuel found himself watching Willa as she drifted off to sleep. Her presence had somehow transformed his simple cabin, bringing a warmth he hadn't realized was missing. It was just temporary, he reminded himself. Once she recovered, she would continue to San Francisco as planned. Still, as sleep claimed him, Samuel couldn't deny the small hope taking root in his heart. Hope for what? He wasn't entirely sure. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the cabin's windows. Samuel woke with a stiff neck from sleeping in the chair but found Willa already awake, watching him with a thoughtful expression. Good morning, he said, stretching his tall frame. How are you feeling? Much better, she replied, though I feel guilty for taking your bed. Samuel waved away her concern. I'm glad to see some color back in your cheeks. Are you hungry? Before she could answer, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Samuel moved to the window, relieved to see Tom returning with an older man he recognized as Dr. Peterson from Sierra City. The doctor's here, he told Willa, heading for the door. Dr. Peterson was a white-haired man in his 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. After brief greetings, Samuel led him to Willa's bedside. Well now, young lady, the doctor said warmly, setting down his medical bag. I understand you've had quite an ordeal. Let's have a look at you. Samuel excused himself, giving them privacy while he and Tom conferred outside. Any news in town about the stagecoach robbery? Samuel asked. Tom nodded grimly. Sheriff Anderson has a posse out searching. Found the coach yesterday, 2 passengers and the driver dead. No sign of the other 3 who were supposed to be aboard. Samuel's heart sank. Did they identify the victims? Not yet. Sheriff's sending telegrams to find out who was scheduled on that route. Tom glanced toward the cabin. You think she'll be all right? She's stronger than she looks, Samuel replied with certainty. After about half an hour, Dr. Peterson emerged from the cabin, wiping his hands on a cloth. She's suffering from exposure and dehydration, as expected, he reported. Some minor cuts and bruises, but nothing serious. She's a fortunate young woman. Another day out there would have been the end of her. Relief washed over Samuel. So she'll recover fully, with proper rest and care, yes, keep her hydrated and fed. Light meals at first, then gradually more substantial fare. I've left some powders for pain and to help her sleep if needed. The doctor fixed Samuel with a meaningful look. She's also experienced a severe shock. The mind sometimes takes longer to heal than the body. Samuel nodded soberly. I understand. I'll come back in a few days to check on her, Dr. Peterson promised. In the meantime, Sheriff Anderson will want to speak with her about the robbery. I'll let him know she's here. After the doctor departed, Samuel returned to find Willa attempting to get out of bed. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked, hurrying to her side. "I can't lie here all day," she protested. "I've imposed enough." "The doctor said you need rest," Samuel countered, gently but firmly guiding her back to the bed. "And you're not imposing." "There's nowhere else for you to go at the moment," she sighed, relenting. "At least let me sit up in a chair for a while. I feel useless just lying here." Samuel considered this. "All right, but only for a short time." He helped her to the small table where Tom had already prepared a simple breakfast of coffee and flapjacks. As they ate, Samuel explained what Tom had learned in town about the stagecoach robbery. "So there might be other survivors?" Willa asked, hope lighting her eyes. "It's possible," Samuel replied cautiously. "The sheriff will want to talk to you when you're feeling stronger." Over the next few days, Willa's strength returned steadily. Samuel found himself increasingly drawn to her resilient spirit and quick intelligence. Despite her ordeal, she maintained a quiet dignity that impressed him. They fell into an easy routine. Samuel would handle the ranch chores with Tom during the day, while Willa gradually took on small tasks inside the cabin, insisting on contributing despite his protests. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, talking long into the night. Samuel learned that Willa had been a schoolteacher in St. Louis, that she loved poetry and could recite Wordsworth from memory. She spoke of her dreams of perhaps opening a small school someday. In turn, Samuel told her about his journey west after the war, how he'd worked cattle drives before saving enough to buy this small spread. He described his hopes of expanding the ranch, breeding horses instead of just breaking the wild ones he captured. On the fourth day after her rescue, Sheriff Anderson rode out to the ranch. He was a barrel-chested man with a thick mustache and weathered face that spoke of years under the Nevada sun. "Miss Barrett," he greeted Willa, removing his hat as he entered the cabin. "I'm mighty glad to see you recovering. We feared the worst when we found that stagecoach." Samuel hovered protectively nearby as Willa recounted her experience, her voice steady despite the painful memories. The sheriff listened attentively, occasionally jotting notes in a small book. "You mentioned a man with a scar above his eye," he said when she'd finished. "That sounds like Jake Hollister. He and his gang have hit several stagecoaches in the territory." "Have you found any other survivors?" Willa asked hesitantly. The sheriff's expression softened. "We found one man alive, barely. He's at Doc Peterson's place in town. Older gentleman named Harrison. Took a bullet in the shoulder but should pull through. And the others," she pressed. "I'm sorry, madam, the driver and 2 passengers didn't make it." He cleared his throat uncomfortably. "We've identified them from the passenger manifest, a Mr. Collins and Mrs. Abernathy." Willa closed her eyes briefly. "I remember them. Mr. Collins was traveling to visit his son. Mrs. Abernathy was going to her daughter's wedding." Samuel placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. The sheriff watched this interaction with interest before continuing. "We'll keep searching for Hollister and his gang. In the meantime, I need to ask what your plans are, Miss Barrett. Do you have funds to continue your journey to San Francisco?" Willa's face fell. "My reticule with all my money was in my trunk on the coach." "I'm afraid the robbers took everything of value," Sheriff Anderson confirmed. "We can arrange passage on the next stagecoach if needed, but it might take some time to sort out the details." Before Willa could respond, Samuel spoke up. "There's no rush. Miss Barrett is welcome to stay here until she's fully recovered and has decided what she wants to do." The sheriff nodded, a knowing look passing over his features. "That's mighty generous of you, Aldridge. I'll be in touch if we catch those outlaws or recover any of the passengers' belongings." After the sheriff departed, an awkward silence fell between Samuel and Willa. "You don't have to let me stay," she finally said. "I could find work in Sierra City to earn my passage to San Francisco." Samuel turned to face her directly. "Do you still want to go to San Francisco?" The question hung in the air between them. Willa looked thoughtful, as if considering it for the first time. "It was the plan," she said slowly. "My aunt is expecting me, but—" She hesitated. "But—" Samuel prompted gently. I don't know her very well, Willa admitted. We've only exchanged letters. She offered me a place to stay after my parents died because she felt obligated, not because she particularly wanted me there. Samuel took a careful step closer. And what do you want, Willa? She met his gaze, vulnerability, and something else, something warmer in her eyes. I'm not sure anymore. Everything changed so quickly. Then stay, he said simply. At least until you're sure. Sierra City could use a schoolteacher from what I hear. A small smile curved her lips. You think I could teach here? I think you could do anything you set your mind to, Samuel replied honestly. That evening, as they sat on the small porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Samuel found himself studying Willa's profile. The desert had left its mark on her fair skin, but the worst of the sunburn had faded, revealing a scattering of freckles across her nose that he found inexplicably endearing. It's so peaceful here, she murmured, gazing out at the landscape. Different from what I imagined the West would be like. What did you imagine? Samuel asked. Willa laughed softly. Constant danger, gunfights in the streets, wild Indians attacking at every turn, Samuel smiled. Those things happen, but not as often as the dime novels would have you believe. Most days are just days. Work from sunrise to sunset, trying to build something that will last. Is that what you're doing, building something that will last? She turned to look at him, genuine interest in her expression. I'm trying, he admitted. This land has potential. With the right care, it could support a good-sized herd, maybe even a family someday. He hadn't meant to add that last part and felt his face warm slightly. Willa didn't seem to notice his discomfort. I think that's what everyone wants deep down, to build something meaningful. They lapsed into comfortable silence as the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the mountains. Stars began to appear, more brilliant than Willa had ever seen in the city. Oh, she exclaimed, pointing upward, look at how many there are. Samuel watched her face, illuminated by starlight and wonder, and felt something shift inside him. He'd been alone for so long, focused solely on survival and building his ranch. He'd forgotten what it felt like to share a moment of beauty with someone, to see the world through fresh eyes. Samuel. Willa's voice pulled him from his thoughts. What are you thinking about? The truth rose to his lips before he could stop it. That finding you in the desert might be the best thing that's happened to me in years. The words hung between them, more revealing than he'd intended. Willa's eyes widened slightly, but instead of the discomfort he feared, he saw a soft smile spread across her face. Even though I've completely disrupted your life, she asked, her tone gently teasing but with an undercurrent of genuine question. Especially because of that, he replied honestly. I didn't realize how empty things had become. Willa's hand found his in the darkness, her fingers cool against his work-roughened palm. I'm glad you found me, she whispered, not just because you saved my life. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Finally, Samuel reluctantly stood. It's getting late, you still need your rest. Willa rose as well, still holding his hand. Thank you, she said simply, squeezing his fingers before letting go and heading inside. Samuel remained on the porch for a long time afterward, staring at the stars and wondering at the strange turns life could take. 1 week ago, he had been a solitary rancher with modest ambitions. Now, he found himself contemplating a future he hadn't dared to imagine since Elizabeth died. The next morning, Tom announced that he needed to make a supply run to Sierra City. Anything special you need? He asked Samuel, glancing meaningfully toward Willa, who was hanging laundry on the line behind the cabin. Samuel considered for a moment. See if Mrs. Potter at the general store has any books, and maybe some fabric if Willa wants to make herself something new. He reached into his pocket and handed Tom some extra money, and something sweet, maybe those peppermint sticks she carries sometimes. Tom raised an eyebrow but took the money without comment. I'll be back by sundown, he promised, mounting his horse. After Tom departed, Samuel approached Willa. I need to check on the north pasture fence today. Would you like to come along? The ride might do you good and it's not too far. Her face lit up at the suggestion. I'd love to. Are you sure I won't be in the way? Not at all, he assured her. I could use the company. Samuel helped Willa mount Penny while he took Tom's horse, a steady gelding named Buck. They rode at an easy pace, giving Samuel the chance to point out various landmarks and tell stories about his early days on the ranch. "Over there is where I found my first wild Mustang," he said, indicating a small canyon to the east. "Beautiful black stallion with a white blaze. Took me 3 weeks to gain his trust. Do you still have him?" Willa asked. Samuel nodded. "That's Thunder in the corral back home. He's still half wild, but we've come to an understanding." They reached the north pasture by mid-morning. While Samuel worked on mending the broken fence posts, Willa explored the nearby creek, gathering wildflowers that grew along its banks. "These are beautiful," she called to him, holding up a bouquet of vibrant desert blooms. "I've never seen flowers like these before." Samuel paused in his work, wiping sweat from his brow. "They only appear after it rains. Tough little things, they store water for months waiting for the right moment to bloom. Like people sometimes," Willa observed thoughtfully, "waiting for the right conditions to become who they're meant to be." Samuel regarded her curiously. "Is that what you're doing, waiting to bloom?" Willa smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "Maybe I already am." She twirled with her flowers, her skirt flaring around her ankles. The joy in her movement, so at odds with the frightened, half-dead woman he'd found in the desert, made Samuel's heart swell. They shared a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and dried fruit under the shade of a cottonwood tree. As they ate, Willa asked about Samuel's life before coming west. "I grew up in Pennsylvania," he told her. "My father was a blacksmith, taught me the trade, but I always preferred working with horses to shoeing them." "Is your family still there?" Samuel nodded. "My parents and younger sister I write when I can, but letters take months sometimes." "Do you miss it?" she asked softly. He considered the question. "Sometimes, but this is home now. I can't imagine living anywhere else." He gestured to the open landscape around them. "There's a freedom here you can't find back east." "I'm beginning to understand that," Willa admitted. "Everything feels bigger somehow, not just the land, but the possibilities." On the ride back to the ranch, they took a different route that led them through a small, hidden valley lush with greenery, a stark contrast to the surrounding arid landscape. "This is my favorite place on the ranch," Samuel confessed as they dismounted to let the horses drink from a clear spring. "I come here when I need to think or just escape for a while." Willa walked to the edge of the spring, where tiny purple and white flowers grew in abundance. "It's like a secret garden," she said with delight. "How did you find it?" "By accident," Samuel replied, joining her. "I was chasing a stray calf during my first year here and stumbled upon it. The underground spring keeps it green year-round." Willa turned to face him, her expression suddenly serious. "Thank you for sharing this with me, and for everything else." Samuel found himself standing closer to her than he'd intended, drawn by some invisible force he couldn't name. "You don't need to thank me," he said, his voice low. "I do," she insisted. "You saved more than just my life, Samuel. You've given me a chance to discover what I really want." "And what is that?" he asked, scarcely breathing. Willa's gaze dropped to his lips, then back to his eyes. "I'm still figuring it out," she whispered. "But I'm getting closer every day." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Samuel found himself leaning closer, drawn by the warmth in her eyes. Just as his lips were about to touch hers, the distant sound of a gunshot shattered the moment. They both jerked back, instinctively ducking. "That came from the direction of the ranch," Samuel said tensely, already moving toward the horses. "We need to get back." They rode hard, Samuel's mind racing with possibilities, none of them good. As they approached the ranch, he saw 3 horses he didn't recognize hitched outside the cabin. His stomach dropped when he spotted the men on his porch, rough-looking characters with bandanas around their necks. He pulled his horse to a stop behind a cluster of boulders, motioning for Willa to do the same. "It's them," she whispered, her face pale with fear. "The men who robbed the stagecoach. The one in the middle has the scar above his eye." Samuel quickly assessed the situation. "They must be looking for you. The sheriff mentioned your testimony could identify them." Willa's hands trembled on the reins. "What do we do?" Samuel's mind worked rapidly. "Tom should be back from town soon. If we can create a distraction, maybe draw them away from the cabin." He was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats from the direction of Sierra City. Tom was returning, unaware of the danger. "We have to warn him," Samuel said urgently. "Stay here, hidden." Before Willa could protest, he had wheeled his horse around and was racing toward the trail, hoping to intercept Tom before he rode straight into an ambush. He caught sight of Tom just as he crested a small rise. "Bandits at the ranch," Samuel called, waving frantically. Tom reacted instantly, pulling his horse off the trail and dismounting to join Samuel behind a large rock. "Hollister's gang?" he asked grimly, already checking his revolver. Samuel nodded. "3 of them, Willa's hidden back in the rocks." Tom reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a rifle. "I picked this up in town, thought it might come in handy with those wolves that have been bothering the calves." He handed it to Samuel. "Got a box of ammunition too." Samuel quickly loaded the rifle. "We need a plan. They're probably after Willa to silence her." "Or they're just looking for a place to hole up," Tom suggested. "Either way, we can't let them stay." They formulated a hasty plan. Tom would circle around to approach the cabin from the north, while Samuel would create a distraction to draw the bandits' attention. Once the outlaws were focused on Samuel, Tom would try to get a clear shot. "Be careful," Samuel told his friend. "These men are killers." Tom nodded solemnly. "You too, I'd hate to have to break in a new boss." With that, he crept away, leading his horse quietly through the brush. Samuel returned to Willa, explaining the plan quickly. "Stay hidden no matter what happens," he instructed. "If things go wrong, take Penny and ride for Sierra City." Willa clutched his arm. "Samuel, please be careful. These men won't hesitate to kill you." "I know," he said grimly. "But they're not taking my ranch, and they're certainly not getting anywhere near you." Their eyes met, and this time Samuel didn't hesitate. He leaned forward and kissed her briefly but firmly on the lips. "For luck," he murmured as he pulled away. Before she could respond, he was moving, positioning himself where he would have a clear shot at the cabin but also be visible enough to draw attention. Taking a deep breath, Samuel raised the rifle and fired a shot into the air. The effect was immediate. The 3 men on the porch ducked for cover, then emerged with weapons drawn. "That's far enough," Samuel shouted. "This is private property." The man with the scar, Hollister, stepped forward, a sneer on his face. "Well now, looks like the owners returned. We was just making ourselves comfortable." "You're not welcome here," Samuel called back, keeping his rifle trained on them. "Best you move on," Hollister laughed, an ugly sound. "Actually, we're looking for something that belongs to us, a witness to a misunderstanding. Word is she might have ended up here." "Don't know what you're talking about," Samuel replied evenly. "Now mount up and ride out before this gets ugly." "It's already ugly," Hollister snarled, raising his pistol and firing in Samuel's direction. The bullet struck the rock beside him, sending stone chips flying. Samuel ducked, then returned fire, aiming carefully at Hollister but deliberately missing just close enough to make the outlaw dive for cover. "You're outgunned," Samuel shouted. "There are more of us than you think." As if on cue, Tom fired from his position to the north, his bullet striking one of the other bandits in the arm. The man yelled in pain, dropping his weapon. Chaos erupted as the outlaws scattered, firing wildly. Samuel kept up a steady rate of fire, moving positions between shots to confuse them about his location. The wounded bandit managed to mount his horse and fled, riding hard toward the west. Samuel caught a glimpse of Hollister circling toward the boulders where Willa was hidden. Cold fear gripped him had the outlaw somehow spotted her. "Hollister," he shouted, desperate to draw the man's attention. "It's over, the sheriff knows you're here." The distraction worked. Hollister turned, firing rapidly in Samuel's direction. One bullet grazed Samuel's upper arm, tearing through his shirt and leaving a burning trail across his skin. He gritted his teeth against the pain, taking careful aim at Hollister. Before he could pull the trigger, Tom's rifle cracked from closer range. Hollister staggered, clutching his leg where the bullet had struck. The third bandit, seeing his leader wounded, apparently decided the fight wasn't worth it. He mounted quickly and pulled Hollister onto his horse before galloping away, leaving a trail of dust. Samuel waited, making sure they were truly gone before calling to Tom. "You all right?" "Fine," Tom called back, emerging from his cover. "You're bleeding, though." Samuel glanced at his arm. "Just a graze, I'll live." His thoughts immediately turned to Willa. Keep watch in case they circle back. I need to check on Willa. He hurried to the boulders where he'd left her, fear clutching at his heart. What if Hollister had spotted her before Samuel drew his attention? Willa, he called cautiously. She appeared from behind a large rock, her face pale but determined. When she saw his bloody sleeve, she gasped. You're hurt. It's nothing, he assured her, relief washing through him at the sight of her unharmed. Are you all right? She nodded, moving quickly to his side to examine his wound. This needs cleaning and bandaging. Let's get back to the cabin. As they walked back, Samuel kept his rifle ready, scanning the horizon constantly. Tom joined them, reporting no sign of the outlaws. One was hit pretty bad in the arm, he said. The other took a bullet to the leg. They won't get far, especially if that arm keeps bleeding. Inside the cabin, Willa immediately set about tending to Samuel's wound, cleaning it with whiskey from his small supply and bandaging it with strips torn from one of her petticoats. Her hands were gentle but efficient, betraying her experience caring for others. My father was often ill in his later years, she explained when Samuel commented on her skill. I learned to nurse him. Tom, meanwhile, was assessing the damage to the cabin. They made quite a mess searching the place, but nothing that can't be fixed, he reported. I'll ride to town and alert the sheriff about what happened. After Tom departed, Samuel sat at the table while Willa prepared a simple meal from the supplies Tom had brought back from town. They'll come back, she said quietly, her back to him as she worked. As long as I'm here, you're in danger. Samuel stood, crossing to where she stood. Gently, he turned her to face him. Listen to me, Willa. What happened today isn't your fault. Hollister and his gang were robbing and killing long before you came along. But they're specifically looking for me now, she insisted, tears gathering in her eyes. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me. Samuel's good hand came up to cup her cheek. Nothing's going to happen to me. The sheriff will capture them, and this will all be over. And then what? She whispered, leaning slightly into his touch. I continue to San Francisco as if none of this happened. The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Samuel took a deep breath, knowing what he wanted to say but uncertain if it was too soon, too presumptuous. That depends, he finally said. Is that still what you want? Willa's eyes searched his. I've been thinking about what you said about Sierra City needing a schoolteacher, about building something that lasts. Hope bloomed in Samuel's chest. And I think I might like to stay, she admitted softly. At least long enough to see if I could make a life here, if that's still something you'd welcome. Samuel's answer was to lower his head and capture her lips with his. This kiss was different from their hasty one before the gunfight, deeper, more certain. Willa responded immediately, her hands coming up to rest against his chest as she returned the kiss with equal fervor. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the moment you opened your eyes in the desert, he confessed. A small laugh escaped her. Even when I was covered in dust and half dead, even then, he confirmed, smiling, there was something about you, Willa Barrett, something that felt like coming home. She kissed him again, briefly but sweetly. For a man who lives alone in the wilderness, you have quite a way with words, Samuel Aldridge. They were interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Samuel immediately tensed, reaching for his rifle, but relaxed when he recognized Sheriff Anderson's voice calling out a greeting. The sheriff entered with Tom and 2 deputies. Heard you had some unwelcome visitors, he said, removing his hat. His eyes narrowed when he noticed Samuel's bandaged arm and the obvious intimacy of the moment he'd interrupted. Hollister's gang, I presume? Samuel nodded, reluctantly stepping back from Willa but keeping one hand at the small of her back. 3 of them. We wounded 2 before they fled west. The sheriff smiled grimly. Good, we'll head out after them right away. They can't have gone far with those injuries. He turned to Willa. You all right, Miss Barrett? Didn't harm you. I'm fine, she assured him. They didn't know I was here. Mr. Aldridge and Tom kept me safe. Sheriff Anderson nodded approvingly. Good man, Aldridge, always knew you had grit. He studied them both for a moment, a knowing look in his eyes. Well, we'd best get after those bandits before the trail goes cold. Tom says he'll ride with us if that's all right with you, Aldridge. Of course, Samuel agreed. Just be careful, Hollister's desperate now." After the lawman departed, a heavy silence fell in the cabin. The events of the day had changed things between Samuel and Willa, accelerating feelings that had been building since he first found her in the desert. "You should rest," Willa said, gesturing to his wounded arm. "You've lost blood." Samuel caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Only if you'll rest with me." Her eyes widened slightly, but then she smiled, understanding his meaning. "I'd like that." They lay together on Samuel's bed, not for passion but for comfort and closeness, his good arm around her shoulders as she curled against his side. The stress of the day caught up with them quickly, and soon they were both asleep, finding safety in each other's arms. The next morning they were awakened by the sound of horses approaching. Samuel was instantly alert, reaching for his rifle, but relaxed when he heard Tom's familiar whistle. "Good news," Tom announced as they emerged from the cabin. "Sheriff's posse caught Hollister and his man about 10 miles west. The third one bled out before they could reach help." Relief washed over Willa's face. "So it's over. They'll go to prison," Tom nodded grimly. "Hanging's more likely." "They killed 3 people on that stagecoach, plus 2 more in a robbery last month near Carson City." The knowledge that justice would be served brought a sense of closure, but Samuel noticed Willa still seemed troubled. "What is it?" he asked when Tom had gone to tend the horses. "I was just thinking about the families of those who died," she said softly. "No punishment can bring their loved ones back." Samuel took her hand. "No, it can't, but knowing those responsible won't hurt anyone else brings some peace." Willa nodded slowly. "I suppose you're right." She squeezed his hand. "I've been thinking about what happens next." Samuel's heart beat faster. "And Sheriff Anderson mentioned that Sierra City's schoolteacher is retiring at the end of the term. He thinks the town council might be interested in speaking with me about taking the position." Joy surged through Samuel. "You're staying?" A smile blossomed on her face. "If that offer to help me build something that lasts is still open." Instead of answering with words, Samuel pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in an exuberant embrace. Her laughter, bright and unrestrained, was the sweetest sound he'd ever heard. "I take it that's a yes?" she asked when he finally set her down. "That's definitely a yes," he confirmed, his eyes shining with happiness. "I never thought I'd get a second chance at love, Willa. Finding you in that desert was the beginning of something I never expected." "When you gave me your water that day, you saved my life," she said softly. "But I think you gave me your heart at the same moment, didn't you?" Samuel nodded, touched by her perception. "I believe I did, though I didn't realize it then." "And I've given you mine in return," she whispered, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. Over the following weeks, Willa settled into life at the ranch while preparing for her interview with the Sierra City Town Council. Samuel expanded the cabin, adding a small second room that would become her private space until they were properly married. An eventuality they both accepted as inevitable, though neither was in a rush. Tom, ever practical, took to the changes with good humor, especially when Willa proved to be an excellent cook who insisted on feeding them properly. "If you don't marry her soon," he told Samuel one evening as they sat on the porch, "I might have to propose myself just for the biscuits." Samuel laughed, watching through the window as Willa moved around the cabin, humming to herself as she worked. "I think you're out of luck, Tom. I plan to ask her properly once the schoolteacher position is settled." Sierra City embraced Willa warmly. The town council was impressed by her education and experience, and with a letter of recommendation from her former school in St. Louis. Sent at Sheriff Anderson's request, she was offered the position starting in the fall term. On a warm evening in late summer, Samuel took Willa back to the hidden spring valley that had become their special place. He had prepared a small picnic and brought along a bottle of wine purchased specially from Sierra City's only hotel. "This is lovely," Willa said, spreading a blanket beneath the cottonwood tree. "What's the occasion?" Samuel smiled mysteriously. "Does there need to be one?" They ate and talked as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in spectacular hues of orange and pink. When they had finished the meal, Samuel took Willa's hand and led her to the edge of the spring. "I've been thinking about what you said about the desert flowers," he told her. How they wait for the right conditions to bloom. Willa smiled at the memory. Yes. I was like that after Elizabeth died, he admitted. Just surviving, not really living, until I found you. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Willa's eyes widened as he opened it to reveal a simple but elegant gold ring set with a small pearl. I know it hasn't been long, he said, suddenly nervous. And if you think it's too soon, I understand, but I love you, Willa Barrett. I think I started falling in love with you the moment I found you in the desert. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Tears sprang to Willa's eyes, but her smile was radiant. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Samuel, I love you too. He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling slightly. It fit perfectly, just as she fit perfectly into his life. Their wedding took place in Sierra City's small church on a crisp autumn day. The entire town turned out for the occasion, having embraced the romantic tale of the cowboy who found his future wife stranded in the desert. Willa wore a simple white dress made from fabric Samuel had ordered specially from San Francisco. Her aunt had sent a lace veil as a wedding gift, along with her apologies for not being able to attend but her blessing for the union. As they exchanged vows, Samuel could scarcely believe how much his life had changed in the span of a few months. The lonely existence he had grown accustomed to had been transformed by the woman standing before him, her eyes shining with love and promise. I, Samuel, take you, Willa, he spoke clearly, his voice carrying through the church, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. Willa's voice was steady as she repeated the vows, her fingers warm in his grasp. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss was met with cheers and applause from the assembled townsfolk. The celebration continued at the town's hotel, where a feast had been prepared. Even Sheriff Anderson joined the festivities, raising a toast to the couple. To Samuel and Willa, he said, glass held high, proof that even in the harshest desert, love can bloom. Later that night, as they returned to their ranch, now truly their home, Samuel lifted Willa from the wagon and carried her across the threshold. Welcome home, Mrs. Aldridge, he murmured against her hair. She smiled up at him, her face illuminated by moonlight. It feels like I've been home since the day you found me. 5 years later, the Aldridge Ranch had grown considerably. With careful management and Samuel's skill with horses, they had built one of the most respected horse breeding operations in the territory. The original cabin had been expanded into a comfortable house with a proper kitchen, 3 bedrooms, and a small study where Willa prepared her lessons when she wasn't teaching in the town's schoolhouse. On a warm spring afternoon, Samuel rode in from checking the herd to find Willa sitting on the porch, watching their 4-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, playing with a wooden horse Samuel had carved for her last Christmas. Papa, Elizabeth called, running to him as he dismounted. Samuel scooped her up, twirling her in the air before settling her on his hip. Hello, princess. Have you been helping your mama today? Elizabeth nodded solemnly. I helped with the bread and read my letters. She's getting quite good, Willa confirmed, rising to greet her husband with a kiss. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, where their second child was due in just a few months. Samuel set Elizabeth down to run off and play, then wrapped his arm around Willa's waist, his other hand joining hers on her belly. How are you feeling today? He asked. Better than yesterday, she assured him. This one's not as restless as Elizabeth was. They stood together, watching their daughter chase butterflies in the yard. The ranch had prospered beyond Samuel's wildest dreams, but his greatest treasure was the family he and Willa had built together. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't decided to track those Mustangs that day? Willa asked, leaning her head against his shoulder. Samuel pressed a kiss to her temple. Sometimes. But then I remember something my father used to say, that life's most important crossroads don't have signposts. That's quite profound, she said with a smile. He was a wise man, Samuel agreed, and I think he would have loved you almost as much as I do. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across their land, Samuel reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that desperate moment in the scorching desert when he'd shared his precious water with a stranger, to this peaceful evening surrounded by the fruits of their love and labor, he couldn't imagine a more perfect path. "I never thanked you properly," Willa said suddenly, as if reading his thoughts. "For what? For stopping that day, for giving me your water when you needed it yourself, for risking everything for a stranger." Samuel turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his. "It was the best decision I ever made," he said simply. "Finding you in that desert wasn't chance, Willa. It was fate." She smiled, the same smile that had captured his heart all those years ago. "Then I'm grateful for fate." As they called Elizabeth in for supper, Samuel sent up a silent prayer of thanks for the twist of destiny that had led him to that remote spot in the Nevada desert on a scorching summer day. He had given Willa his water and his heart on the same day, never expecting how completely she would fill the emptiness he hadn't even recognized within himself. Their love story, born in the harshest of circumstances, had flourished against all odds, proof that even in the wild, unforgiving landscape of the West, love could take root, grow strong, and endure.